Hello to our fellow Tudor time travellers, and welcome to this introductory episode of a new podcast series on progress with the Tudors Uncut, brought to you by the Tudor Travel Guide and in close collaboration with On the Tudor Trail. I know that as a lover of Tudor history, whether you're a resident in the UK or you're visiting from overseas, there's nothing more you love than hitting the road and visiting castles and manors and houses which have strong connections with the Tudor era. The chance to get up close and personal, to see and to touch these places is a true delight. And as the Tudor Travel Guide, I make it my personal mission to provide all the insider information on where to go, what to do, and what to see, so that you never have to leave a Tudor property again saying, oh, if only I'd known about. But today we're here to kick off a new Tudor adventure, which will bring to life many Tudor locations that neither Natalie or I have ever written about before. And this, of course, means that many new places to visit and explore, and we want you to join us on that journey. For as you will hear, we will really be talking about a whole series of journeys spanning the entire Tudor era. So lots of opportunities to indulge our shared passion. But more on that in a moment. First, let's introduce ourselves. So I'm here today with my Tudor partner in crime, Natalie Grueninger from On the Tudor Trail. Hello, Nat, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, it's so lovely to be speaking to you again.
I know, we're doing this quite often, aren't we?
I know, we're making a habit of it, aren't we? So just to say that Natalie and I recently spoke on your new podcast, actually. Natalie, do you want to say just a couple of words about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called Talking Tudors, and I've been, doing exactly that, talking about the Tudors with various authors and historians, and I spoke with you, Sarah. That was the first one, which has been really popular. We received so many lovely comments, and it's been a lot of fun just talking. So in the last 2 weeks, we've chatted about Tudor places. I've spoken about the Battle of Bosworth, Thomas More, Catherine Howard. So
wow,
lots of great stuff. Yeah, and you can just Google it and it'll come up. Yep, you can listen to the podcast.
Brilliant. That's great. So here we are again with a new adventure. But some people probably know us quite well and may well have listened to us talk on your podcast. And for other people, they might be coming to us afresh. So perhaps we should introduce ourselves a little bit and talk a little bit about our background and why we're interested in the Tudor period. So, what's the story for you, Natalie?
Okay, how long do you have?
Quite.
Okay, I'll do the abridged version. So I've always been drawn to the past. I think for as long as I can remember, I've just been fascinated by this idea or this thought that where I'm walking now and where I'm living my days out, other people have done so before. And it sounds a bit like, weird to say, but I'm quite fascinated by that idea. And I've also always found that there are certain places, I suppose, where the past just feels more alive. So I've always been quite fascinated with the past and with this idea that in certain locations, this gulf between us and them, I suppose, it closes. So that's one thing. But my actual love for the Tudors didn't really begin until about my early 20s. And that was thanks to a wonderful novel by Robin Maxwell called The Secret Diary of Anne Boleyn.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of felt this immediate connection or link with this person, Anne Boleyn, that I knew nothing about, because if the accent hasn't given me away, I'm an Aussie and we don't learn about the Tudors at school. So I really had no background. There was nothing really there. I didn't know about this history until I read this book, and I felt really connected to it and drawn. And then I guess not long after that, I had booked a trip to do a European tour. And I had a few days in London. And I asked my sister, what do you think I should do when I've got 3 days in London, and the first time I'd ever been there? And she said, okay, well, you have to go to the Tower of London and you must go to Hampton Court. So, I did that in November. It was absolutely freezing. Like my poor Aussie self was just shivering away. But I went to the Tower and then I went to Hampton Court, and that just absolutely fueled the fire that was sparked by Maxwell's wonderful novel. And I immediately became curious. I wanted to know more. So I spent, a long time after that just reading. I read a lot of novels. And then as generally happens, you want to then know the facts. You want to know, okay, what's true, what's not. So I turned to nonfiction. And that led me to, because I always loved the places that I was reading about, that led me to start On the Tudor Trail. So that was in like 2009. And I started recording and researching places that were connected to Anne Boleyn. So that was kind of how the love of the Tudors started. And then that's just continued. What started as a kind of little interest. It's probably more like an obsession.
Yes. I can relate to that. One thing leads to another, doesn't it? That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And what about you, Sarah? What started your love?
I'm brought up in the UK here, and certainly when I was sort of around 10, 11, you used to study the Tudors at school. So I actually remember the classroom I think I was in when we were learning about the Tudors. And I remember being completely riveted by this story from day one. And in fact, I've got a very vivid recollection of doing a hand drawing of Elizabeth I as a young child. You know, the painting that was done of her when she was about sort of 14 or so. I copied that. I remember presenting it to my teacher. So, I was gone at an early stage. And
I know what you mean. They kind of get you, don't they? It's like you're trapped.
You're gone. You're gone. Absolutely. And then combine that with the fact that my parents just loved going and visiting historic houses. And I really did spend practically every weekend during the summer months visiting one stately home or castle or another. And I guess that all came together and made just this real love and passion for historic places for the Tudor period. And a little like you say, Natalie, you start reading, then one thing leads to another, and you get more and more involved. And so here I am, and that all accumulated really in my coming out of the closet in around 2010, 2011, when I began writing the first novel, Le Temps Viendra, a novel of Anne Boleyn. And that's when I came on the social media sphere. And indeed, that's where we met, I believe. Can you remember that?
I do remember that, because I think I'd only been on Twitter for a little while. And I remember, you kind of look at people's profiles and see what everyone's doing. And you had written in your profile that you were writing a novel about Anne Boleyn. And I thought, how fascinating. So I think I must have messaged you or tweeted you, and
absolutely.
And it went from there, didn't it? We both thought, we're so similar, we like so much the same thing.
It certainly did. One thing certainly led to another, and I suppose our kind of online friendship then moved to a writing partnership around 2012. And when we started writing our first book together, which of course was In the Footsteps of Anne Boleyn, and I always described that as a kind of a part academic, part travelogue, which followed Anne from cradle to grave, but really focused on telling her story through the places she visited and called home.
That's exactly right. And because we obviously, I think very quickly, we realised that we had this sort of shared love for those places.
Absolutely.
We enjoyed recreating them as Anne would have known them. Like, I think we were quite particular about that, about seeing through Anne's eyes at that point. And then it didn't take long. Like, we finished In the Footsteps of Anne Boleyn. And I remember that was our first sort of book, and it took us a while, and it was very intense. But not long after, we started writing the book, In the Footsteps of the Six Wives of Henry VIII. So this was a similar format, but it was focused on, rather than a comprehensive guide, that was the top 10 or so of the most interesting locations associated with each of Henry VIII's consorts. And now, after a break of a couple of years, we're back to our next adventure.
Indeed we are, and I think we're really excited about this, aren't we? And so I think it's probably a good idea to talk about the new book, don't you?
Yes, that sounds really good.
So our new venture, dear listeners, is called On Progress with the Tudors. And once more, we'll be focusing on Tudor locations in a similar style and format to the In the Footsteps books. But this time there's a bit of a twist. We're going to be looking at writing about some of the most interesting journeys which span the whole of the Tudor era.
I'm getting excited just thinking about it. Getting that feeling in my tummy. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, in other words, we'll be following one or more Tudor journeys or progresses associated with each of the Tudor monarchs, plus one or two other prominent characters of the age, such as Elizabeth of York, Margaret Tudor, Catherine of Aragon, and Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yeah, and we're going to be recording those journeys in full. So we'll be charting the progress of the various characters as they move from one location to another, one property to another. And I think it's going to be pretty epic, having done our sort of outline research on this. Don't you think, Natalie?
Absolutely. And I don't want to say too much, but I have found some interesting things already, Sarah.
Yes.
You don't even know yet.
Oh, I can't wait. But the juices are certainly flowing. But I suppose the question is, where does this podcast then fit into all of that? So, Nat, do you want to explain what we're hoping to achieve for our listeners with this podcast?
Absolutely, definitely. Well, there's a reason why we're calling the podcast On Progress with the Tudors Uncut. So what we're aiming to do is share the journey of our research process in real time with our listeners. So we'll be coming together in conversation every 3 weeks or so to talk about the locations we're researching, what we're finding out, our triumphs and our excitement, and all the many rabbit holes that will undoubtedly disappear down.
Yeah,
quite a ride.
And we will, no doubt. But it did occur to us, obviously, we were playing with this idea for a while, and we were thinking about, when authors normally write books, and we've definitely done this ourselves, you disappear, don't you, into the research for a period of time, and then suddenly, many months later, you re-emerge with a sort of, ta-da, here's the book moment. But we thought, how much fun would it be to bring that whole process out into the open so that our fellow Tudor enthusiasts would actually witness a book in the making?
Well, that's exactly right. And we also want people to get involved.
Yes. So, folks, here's our invitation to you. With each episode that we publish, we'll be inviting you to get involved directly. You'll be able to submit pictures of the places we are looking at, stories, maybe even bits of research of your own, or even you just might have questions about the places that we are looking into and researching at that particular time.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your contribution actually makes it into the book, you'll, of course, be mentioned in a special acknowledgement section at the front of the book. We think it's a first in the Tudor sphere, a kind of fly-on-the-wall docu-book, if that's a word, and I'm really excited to get sharing with you.
Well, if it wasn't a word, it is now, I think.
Docu-book, I like it.
Yeah. So to help that whole process along, what we've done is we've created a new Facebook group where you can share your thoughts and your questions, your photos, or your finds as we go along.
Yeah, and no doubt we'll be posting too, of course.
Yeah, of course. There'll be plenty of that. So maybe let's think a little bit about what's coming in the first series. And do you want to maybe share a little bit about that, Nat?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be exploring the journeys chronologically. So naturally, we're starting at the dawn of the Tudor era. So each journey will form a chapter in the book and we'll have an accompanying podcast series. So our first series here on Progress with the Tudors Uncut is about Henry VII and his progress north to York, which he embarked on in March 1486, so only 7 months after winning his crown on the battlefield.
And along the way, we'll be visiting places like Waltham, Cambridge, Stamford, Huntingdon, Nottingham, Tadcaster and York, amongst others. So it's going to be quite a progress.
Yes, I think our fellow time travellers are going to really enjoy this, and they can actually look forward to 6 episodes in this first series. Each episode will cover 2 locations at a time, but we will be talking more about that progress in the first episode as well, of course, covering our first 2 locations, which will be the Priory of the Hospital of St John in London, which is actually where Henry embarked from, and Waltham Holy Cross in Essex.
Okay, that sounds good. And so I think, without further ado, we're ready to start by bringing this brief introductory podcast to a close. Do get in touch with us and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. You can contact me via the blog www.thetudortravelguide.com or on Twitter, where my username is @TheTTGuide. And don't forget the special Facebook group, which is open now for applications to join. Once again, search on Facebook for On Progress with the Tudors -Uncut. And for all of the details of our various web and social media sites, check out the show notes on Podbean, which will accompany this podcast. So I think that's it for now, Natalie. It has been a pleasure as always, and I look forward to delving into the world of Henry VII and our first 2 locations later this month.
I cannot wait.
So happy researching and happy travelling.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.